Hey, good morning, Mark. How are you?
It's not morning here, but we'll
Is
run
it?
with it. It's been a great day so far. It's good to see
It's
you,
not
Anthony.
morning where I am either.
Okay. Well, let's start over and give a good afternoon, and we're ready to go.
Right on, man. Right
Don't make
on.
these Mondays any longer than they need to be.
Oh, I actually prefer Mondays to the middle of the week,
Hmm.
just because I feel like when you're in the middle of the week, you get sucked down to the bottom of the tornado, and then you have to claw your way back out of it by Friday, so it doesn't destroy
Yep.
your weekend. But I like Monday because it's the adrenaline rush of getting as much crap done as possible. So then that way you can get ahead of your week. But maybe
Right.
I'm reverse engineering happy thoughts out of a bad thing.
It's always a good day to, like you said, hit the ground running and start on a positive note. That's for sure.
Right on. Well, you have a very, very, very extensive history both in property restoration and with the Restoration Industry Association. It has been said by others that are not on this phone call that a majority of what is happening with the AGA can be traced back to your motivations and inspiration. And so and you know, I tend to be in that camp. We've talked, I'm kind of like a Mark Springer fangirl over here, but just for everybody else who isn't familiar with your personal history in restoration, how'd you get started?
Well, so you can't just move, say that, and then go all the way back to the beginning. Just to set the record straight here. Um, RIA is at a unique juncture right now relative to other seasons it's been. I mean, there's been a lot of different seasons with RIA and its previous entities. I mean, it's all the same entity, but the way it was known in the marketplace, ASCR before that, of course, the notorious AIDS before that. It was a good thing they changed that in about, I think it was around early 1980s, a whole nother story.
Yeah.
And then there was other iterations of that. Some of our other board members, I know Justin Woodard his family goes back to the very beginning, which
Yeah.
is really pretty impressive. But timing is always everything, Anthony, as you and I both would attest. And RIA's impact right now in the industry, which is something I think a lot of us have dreamed of for a while, and that would be that restorers would have a voice. Such a
Hmm.
long season of other entities speaking for contractors in the industry, and I don't think that's healthy, and I don't think that restoration contractors appreciate it. It certainly isn't sustainable.
Hmm.
Um, but there have been so many people. I mean, the real joy. I mean, as I kind of look back now over the last 14 years of board service that I'm kind of on the tail end now of, um, so many incredible people there, and it's been fun to have a hand in that. But I think of how many people along the way have been such important people who've played out. Certainly, you're one of them. Ed Cross, Katie Smith, the current executive committee there, Ben Looper, Warner Cruz, Jeff Moore. Before Justin was on the board, his CFO, Debbie Bogar, was a huge impact. She had a huge impact as well. And the staff and so forth. So there's so many people out there that have had such an important role, and for me, it's just been an incredible honor and privilege to be able to be part of all that. So we can jump back to the beginning now, but I can't let you lavish those sort of superlatives here because they're certainly not deserved. As there's been so many people who've been involved and made this happen for sure.
Right on.
But back to the beginning. So going to your first question. Your first question was, how did I get my start in the restoration industry? Is that right?
Correct.
Is it a fair answer to say I didn't have a choice?
Yeah, always.
So my dad started Dayspring Restoration in 1989. I was all of 11 years old at that point. And I remember when my dad started Dayspring, he had another career before that in sort of the company. It was a paper products company that actually our family had relocated from Idaho to Montana for.
Hmm.
And he was involved in that. My grandfather was the resident manager, really well-known person in our community and very respected in our community. And my dad starts this water and fire restoration company.
Hmm.
And I'm like, of all things, I just remember even when I was little, when I was 11, I was like, of all things that, cleaning up sewer damaged basements and burned up homes. I so remember my first experiences. So this is when I was 11. Um, I remember his first fire damage project was a very extensive fire. And I'm probably 11 or 12 years old at this
Hmm.
point. And there was a room over the garage of this home that had this fire, and it was full of toys. I mean, there was enough toys to start a KB toy and hobby store. I mean, it was this huge amount of toys. And I just remember my dad handing me a clothes basket and telling me to pack all those clothes, one clothes basket at a time, to the bathtub and then scrub these, like, those oversized Legos. So
Yeah.
little Legos are bad enough on your feet, but the big ones are really, really terrible. So I had like just basket after basket after basket. I was cleaning these things in a bathtub and a toothbrush. So this is back in the late 80s, early 90s. And I just remember, like, my hands, of course, we had no PPE for anything that we were doing. And of
Yep.
course, ultrasonics were not something that was even on the radar at that point. Um, and I just remember my hands are like shriveling up. And I've got I've got Ultra Pack Industrial, which was like I think it was A212 was the Prochem product you'd use to
Hmm.
clean the smoke off these things. And I mean, it's just doing a number on my hands. And I'm just like, man, why did my dad do this? And then I remember working on sewage damage jobs. I mean, again, no PPE. This is the worst work you can imagine.
Hmm.
And through those years in high school and just kind of the early stages, if you'd asked me, what do you want to do when you grow up? My answer would be anything but this, like anything but property restoration. And at the time, I remember my friends, in high school, I was the only person I knew who carried a cell phone. Not because it was cool, because it was about the size of a box of Michael Jordan, Air Jordans.
Yep.
Uh, it was so if my dad had a loss, he could call me. And so I'd be in the middle of shooting hoops or up skiing on the mountains or whatever, and the phone would ring, and we got a water loss. You need to, be ready to go here. Get back to the headquarters, which was his house with he had a one stall garage with his one or two vans and
Hmm.
25 air movers. So it was definitely humble beginnings, hard work.
Yep.
I never had at that point the appreciation for what was being cultivated in my understanding of what it takes to build a business, what it takes to be successful, what it takes to develop a work ethic, what it takes to be able to do hard things and reap the rewards of doing it the right way.
Hmm.
Working with people to accomplish a task, treating them well, treating them like you want to be treated to get to the goal that you had. Didn't have any inkling of those things, in my teen years. Of course, now at 45 years old, I can look back on it and see what an incredible gift it was. But at the time, it was it was hard. It was hard work, and the industry was so early in its maturation process. There was, I mean, everything. 100% of the business now is totally different.
Yeah.
Very, very important and humble beginnings, but important things to be able to cultivate and develop at a young age.
Yeah. And it's interesting. My old joke is nobody's sitting in the sandbox at 9 years old going, "I want to do this work," right? But we all
That's
end up
right.
here through some, like
That's right.
it's almost like we're running through life and this tiger
Mm,
jumps up and bites us in the butt and we can't
that's
help
right.
but get dragged down by it. And then all of a sudden we're hanging out with this tiger for the rest of our lives.
That's right.
Um, so why did you choose to continue then? Because you even said, "Hey, look, I this was the last thing I wanted to do with my life."
Mhm.
What I don't know if there was a definitive point in time or if it was just a slow burn, but when did you go, "Okay, you know what? I am going to walk these footsteps. I'm making the conscious choice to do this, as opposed to the myriad of other things that I could be doing with my time.
Yeah, so there's really two things that served as sort of forks in the road where I ended up where we are now. The first one really started in my late teen years, late high school. So when I was 15, I started running crews. I had my driver's license when I was 15, and
Mm-hmm.
I was running small crews, right?
Yeah.
When I was really young. And as I started to do that, as I started to actually be involved in the direction of the work and be involved in the execution of the bigger picture of the work, I started to have a little bit better sense of some of the opportunity that was there, right? So it wasn't only scrubbing soot off of walls and extracting water out of carpets and those sort of really dirty jobs, right? There was sort of some epiphanies that I started to have about some of the scale that this business could have, and particularly in the repair side of the business. So initially, our work was primarily focused on mitigation. And I started to see how the full scope from a customer experience could be impacted by a restoration company that took the full scale and full scope of the project. So that was sort of one of the first things that I started to see in business. And then the second thing really that started to change some of my mindset was initially I wanted to actually be in law. And right out of high school, I won this internship at a law firm out in the East Coast, out in the Washington, D.C. Beltway area.
Mm.
And I worked out there for part of a year in this internship. It was like it was like not, it was a little more than 6 months or something like that for this internship. And I learned very quickly that my sort of entrepreneurial side was maybe a strength that I had.
Mm-hmm.
Because as I was doing all this legal research and working in that business, if you want to call it that practice,
Yep.
I recognized two things. One is your ability to impact your earnings for your life was really fixed by two factors. One is how many hours you're going to work, or
Mm-hmm.
two, how much you can charge per hour. And from an entrepreneurial perspective, those two limitations were just really troubling to me. And so I remember when I was gone, there was two big things that were happening. One is I had a lot of thinking about what I really want my life to be about as far as my calling and the work that I do.
Yeah.
And so I started thinking more about the business that my dad had, the opportunity that was there, the way that his business was running really without, a sales and marketing effort, really
Mm-hmm.
about systems and processes and the things that really define a professionally operated company. And then the second piece was I was a little just concerned about my family. My dad, the year I was gone, I was my dad's key employee, even though I was really young and I was in my
Mm-hmm.
teens. I was kind of his key employee. And when I was gone, the business really faltered. And I
Mm.
got back from the East Coast, and I remember looking at their kind of open up there. They had QuickBooks at the time, and looking at QuickBooks, and it was a grim picture. I mean, I think their revenues the year I was gone was like 75,000 that year. And
Oh
so I
wow.
remember thinking, like, I'm going to need a way to if I'm going to go back here now, go to school, go to college, I'm going to have to work my way through college. If I can help mom and dad get this business sort of squared away,
Mm-hmm.
that'd be really important too. And it could also provide a great experience for me. I didn't think that it would be something I would do as long as I've done. I thought it would maybe be a stepping stone. But in reality, when I got back and started, my dad had always told me he'd love to have me as a partner. And so we kind of came to an agreement as to how that was going to look. And we just started getting serious about the business. I remember talking to him about, okay, Dad, if we're going to do this, we got to develop a business plan. We're going to have to get some capital to be able to build this company. We need to move it out of your house so
Yeah.
that we can have it in a place we can really focus on the business. And we're going to need to also start to look at this repair side of the business and potentially branch out into that side of the industry as well. And so from the get-go, as soon as we started talking about that stuff, that was January 1st, 1998. We were blessed immediately. I remember we had like January 3rd, I think we signed a couple $100,000 fire loss, which was more than he had done the whole year before.
Yeah.
And then we started really developing a end user go-to-market campaign for the advertising and marketing in the business, and it just started tripling, some years quadrupling, like every year, until we
Well,
got to a point that really we had a market saturation in the community that we were in, and so it's just blessed really there from day one, and I give God the glory for that, and thankful for how He's directed these things for us. But it's definitely been quite a journey along the way too.
so one of the things that I learned about you early on, and this was long before you and I even met in person, was that you actually set your house on fire. So I wanted, I want to give that a nod, man, because that is such a cool part of your personal history. Tell me a little bit about that whole exercise and what you learned from it and what you were intending to do and then what actually happened.
It was another one of these crazy circumstances. So from pretty early, so the early 2000s, now we see Serve Pro commercials on national TV, see Belfour,
Mhm.
I'm watching I think, are you a Michigan fan? Do you
As
want
much
to,
as anybody who doesn't watch football that used to live in
yeah.
Michigan is.
Well, it's a good time to be a Michigan fan. So I was watching the
That's what I heard.
Michigan
Yeah.
Ohio State game. I saw there's a Belfour commercial
Yep.
there on in that game. And I'm like, you wouldn't have seen ads on television for property restoration in the early
Hmm.
2000s. But we were really fixed. We had the opportunity to do it in the markets that we serve because the advertising was so cheap.
Hmm.
In Missoula, Montana, I could run a 30-second spot on the 10 o'clock news, which everyone used to watch the news back then, right?
Yep.
Those pre-smartphone, for like $200. So it was super affordable. And so I started try to target our business to the end user. One of the things that was, in my view, a real weakness in the industry was how everyone was trying to build their business around insurance referrals as
Hmm.
all of their lead source, right?
Yep.
And that obviously we know now has some areas that it can be problematic, right? So
Hmm.
we wanted to be able to go to the end user. So I started doing these ads, and in Missoula, Montana, these ads aren't all that sophisticated, and we had some success with them. People be like, "Oh yeah, I saw your TV ads," but they just really weren't hitting to where people were
Hmm.
really responding to them. And I can't even remember what the exact time was, probably in 2004 or so. I was out at a customer's home on a weekend, and they had this massive water loss. And I
Hmm.
remember they were so impressed. We showed up, the cavalry shows up, we've got trailers full of equipment, desiccants, all
Yep.
this stuff. And they said, we had no idea this even existed.
Yep.
And they were so amazed that there was this service that would restore their home. They were beside themselves. It was right before Christmas. We told them, listen, no problem. You guys are not going to miss Christmas.
Hmm.
And I remember around that time thinking about how little education there was amongst the end user or the consumer about what property restoration companies do.
Yep.
And so I just thought, you know what? We need to show people,
Hmm.
and we need to help them understand through a step-by-step process what we do. And I think if I did this in my house, we had this 1970s vintage house, and it was
Hmm.
terribly outdated, and I wanted to like remodel it for my wife anyway. And I was like, we're going to be tearing all this stuff out anyway. Let's flood my house.
Yeah.
And so we just flooded the heck out of my house and then recorded it all. I built all these storyboards for how I wanted to shoot it. And I had a good production crew. And we did this like 4 or 5 part series on, I'm Mark Springer with Day Spring Restoration. I'm going to flood my own home.
Hmm.
And it was incredibly impactful. I mean, much to my wife's chagrin, anytime we would go to a restaurant or we go anywhere in town, people would come up to me and be like, "Hey, are you that guy that flooded your house? And
Yep. Yep.
yeah, did you really do that?" And then we would have people go to my wife like, "Did you, why did you let him do that?" And
Yep.
she's like, "Yeah, I got a new living room and a new
Yep.
dining room out of it and all this stuff." So anyway, incredibly impactful. And then so that series kind of ran its course, and I was like, "Oh, what do I do next?" Well, I mean, the only way you can up the ante is to burn the house.
Yeah.
And you would not believe how hard it is to burn your house legally. It is it is a lot of work. So I started a dialogue with the fire department, because I knew if we did it, we wanted the fire department to be
Yeah.
there and supervise it. And that took like a year to get the go ahead from the county attorney, the city attorney, all these. I mean, there was a million hoops we had to jump
Yeah.
through. I had to pay my house off because the mortgage company and the
Yep.
insurance. I had 6 hours. The insurance company canceled me as soon as they heard I was doing this. So I had like a period of time. My house was paid off, and there was no insurance on it. And the fire department's in there, and we lit the thing on fire. And then that series was incredible. It ended up being like a 14-part series. We walked people through everything. You still actually see them on YouTube.
Yeah.
And the fire departments in our ads, which of course was like worth the price of admission all by itself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was incredible. And one of the coolest things about it was, is I had offered to the fire department that I would pay for public awareness ads. That was sort of one of the ways that they agreed to be a part of this. Is I said, I'll pay for public awareness ads to talk about fire prevention. Of course, I would have loved just having the fire department in my ads anyway,
Yeah.
But that was sort of one of the things they bid on, right? And then at the end of the day, I remember the TV station called something like, "We're short on public awareness ads, so we're just going to run your ads for free on this."
Oh, right on.
I'm like, yes, score.
Yeah.
So anyway, the whole series was incredible. It caught people's attention. It established us as professionals. The ads were as well done as you could do in rural Montana, but it was a great campaign, a lot of fun to do, and they ended up getting spread kind of all over the world. It was a crazy way. Like, I wish now we had some of the stuff that's out there, because they would have like went viral or whatever.
Yeah.
So whatever viral was back then, we had some crazy stories about how they got out into various things, and that'd be a whole separate discussion. But yeah, it was a pretty cool experience.
Yeah. When Angie and I bought our house, we bought a foreclosure, and I'm like, okay, we got to gut this thing, right? It was just beat to hell. And I actually use your videos to show my wife, like, hey, this dude's wife let him like not just put his house, but also set it on fire, and their house is gorgeous. So like, I can do even better, So
there was you bring that up. I don't know what the total amount. There was a guy in Canada that did a house flooding series. There was someone in Arizona that did it. They'd call me up, be like, hey, I saw your ads, and I think I'm going to do it. What tips do you have for me? And, so yeah, it definitely had a ripple effect for sure.
No, for sure. And my big challenge was we couldn't do ASD training in Hawaii. It was just cost prohibitive, right? To send guys to the mainland to a flood school and all of that kind of stuff. And so we had a couple of guys that we, ended up going, but not as much as I would have liked. And so I looked at this as the opportunity to just level set and get everybody that I've wanted to have ASD over the past 5 years, ASD training. And then, so I actually went down the whole rabbit hole of, okay, I need to get my, ASD instructor out here, and then also get the site listed as an ASD school. Well, that was cost prohibitive, right? Because I was only going to flood it once, and the way that model works is you certify a property and you flood it multiple times, and so
over and over. Yeah,
bummer. So the guys didn't get the designation next to their name, but I guarantee you the training was probably a little more impactful. And it was a cool situation, because I told the guys, I'm like, all that stuff that you're terrified to do in Mrs. Jones' house, go nuts. You want to Swiss cheese the wall with a paddle bit? Go nuts, man. Like, see what works, right?
Everyone's
do some freaky stuff, but a little bit more drywall repair than I would have cared to have wanted. But what's that in comparison to having that knowledge for them, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. No, that's cool. I didn't realize that you did that. Or maybe you told me, I forgot, but that's a great story.
No worries. So favorite part of the business?
Well, that's easy. I mean, my absolute favorite part of every day was the teams that we built, and being able to do incredible stuff with the teams that we invested in. Like RIA and the team that we have there, and how the success at RIA has been sort of the sum total of all the energy that these incredibly generous volunteers put into it. I had the same experience in our organization. Um, over the over the years, we had a number of different acquisitions, other companies that we acquired
Hmm.
as we kind of scaled across Montana, and I was just able to bring some really gifted individuals into our organization. Our CFO, he came from a much larger organization, a multi-billion-dollar industrial company, and he helped us professionalize so many aspects of the business that I think really serves as a challenge for a lot of our stores.
Hmm.
I mean, in the business that you work in now at Pivot, I mean, you see underneath the hood of all these companies from
Oh
a
yeah.
financial perspective. And, most people don't have the opportunity to work with some of the people that I was fortunate to be able to bring into our company in that area. And it just smoothed out so many of the challenges. Ultimately cash flow and financial performance drive it's the engine that drives your ability to do all these things to scale, right? And so that was really important. We had great ops people. I was able to hire great ops people from all over the country over many years, and those people stuck with me for a long, long time. I mean, even now there are people at Dayspring that have been there 15, 20, 25. We have a couple people that have been there 30 years.
Wow.
um, and not 30 years at Dayspring, around 30 years at Dayspring, but some of the other companies we've acquired that have come
Yeah.
in. And our HR folks did a great job of helping us tell the story for recruiting people on the team into the team and to be able to retain them. Business development and sales, kind of the other function of the organization. We worked with just great professionals who knew how to be able to tell a differentiated story and be able to drive that throughout the organization and help it grow and scale. I mean, that word scale gets used a lot, but not everyone really does it, right? A lot of people
Hmm.
aspire to scale, to actually truly scale and get that hockey stick growth. I mean, that's a whole nother skill set that takes some whole team of people that
Hmm.
are committed to achieving that. And so that was always my favorite part. I mean, the people I got to work with every day, I loved I shouldn't say I loved every minute. That'd be an overstatement, right? This is property restoration at the end of the day.
Yep.
No, but I had so much fun
Yeah.
working with incredible people. And, it wasn't just our executive team, Anthony. I mean, it was occasionally they would let me go back into the field. It was like vacation to be able to go back out and,
Yeah.
you know, act like I was cool and that I actually knew of what was going on in the business. And, so I was able to go out into the field and, work with folks who were able to deal with all these advancements in the industry. And that was always so wonderful to be able to interact with the people that the culture you were trying to drive in the organization was being driven to, and
Hmm.
see how it was impacting them and how we needed to improve it. And, the areas that we had set out to do certain things, but maybe we were missing the mark, and you'd only hear that, from the people in the field. And so, those were great experiences and certainly the most fun that I ever had.
Awesome. What do you see as the greatest challenge that restorers are facing or will face in the next 5 years? And this is a loaded question for a guy like you who thinks and ruminates quite a bit.
Well, I think it's good. I mean, I think that a lot of the challenges that we faced 5 years ago, which I cannot believe that we launched AGA May of 2019, 5-year anniversary is coming up here in a few months, and that blows my mind. And
Hmm.
I think about some of those challenges that we faced at the onset of AGA with, I mean, the third party consultants was a major pain point.
Hmm.
A lot of the challenges we faced in pricing with Exactware and Verisk, there's been incredible strides that the industry's taken in that area. Still more work to do, but this concept of unifying the industry and then the industry having a voice, I mean, has really played out. So that's been such again, just such a privilege to see. But I think as we look forward, there's really two areas when you think about the big areas of challenge, and certainly pricing and the pricing platforms and interface is going to be a big one where there's a lot more work to be done. But the other one I think is really in the area of contractors being paid in a timely manner.
Mhm.
This continues to be the Achilles heel of so many restorers. They have massive amounts of accounts receivable. I mean, there's a number of different ways people measure this, whether it's, a DSO, days sales outstanding,
Mhm.
or aging days. There's a bunch of different ways people measure that. But I don't think it matters what the metric is. Most investors, if they were looking at the companies that we run, and if we told them this is what our cash conversion rate is, I think
Mhm.
they'd be horrified, and I think that they would say this is a really a problem in the industry, and unfortunately, despite the fact that there are so many different tools for documentation that hypothetically are
Yep.
improving the landscape in that area, it's not making a difference. I
Yeah.
mean, when I look at these things over time, they're very problematic, and I think that challenge creates a whole another series of challenges that may be exacerbated in seasons where the restoration industry has slow times.
Mhm.
The business has been so vibrant for a few years now. There's been tons of capital that's flown into the industry. You had a big COVID impact, a bunch of businesses,
Mhm.
a big uptick from that in a variety of different areas. There's been huge storm years. Here we're going into one of these El Nino seasons, and everyone's talking about how slow they are right now.
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think that a season like this, with these really lagging um, time cycles that people have for being able to get paid, you're going to see some pressure with that, and it's something that needs to get fixed quickly
Mhm.
if the industry is going to continue to thrive.
I can agree. Yeah, it's been interesting watching, the companies that I have proximity to and how much their aging has continued to age and how long things are getting drawn out.
Yep. Yeah, it's
Um,
getting worse.
yeah. Shifting gears, going back, what, almost 12 years now. Why did you join the board?
Almost 14 years. Don't
14 years.
don't
Oh,
cheapen it,
sorry. Hey,
Courtney.
oh, hey, my bad, my bad.
Okay, sorry about that, Anthony. What
No,
was the
all good.
question?
Why'd you join the board in the first place?
It's interesting. I was just talking to Warner Cruz about this. I think it was last week. My daughter, my oldest daughter's married, and she actually works for another restoration company down in Colorado Springs. And her husband's um, Army Special Forces medic, so he's stationed down there. I went down to visit them. That's when you really feel like you've crossed the threshold to getting up there a little bit, Anthony, is when you go start staying with your kids at their houses. Yeah.
Well, mine are
We
3 and 6, so I got some years before that
You're
happened.
a couple of years. You got a couple more years there, but so I went down there and in Colorado Springs, and there was a convention that I had attended in, I believe it was 2010. It was either 2009 or 2010. That's like 14 years we came up with. And it was grim. RIA was not in a good place at that convention. I remember at the Broadmoor when we had that convention, it was very, very poorly attended. I mean, it was sort of like a ghost town there. And I'd had a season there when RIA or when ASCR went to RIA that, I was really young. I was working to build the business. I don't think that, young people um, really had all that much of a chance of really making any impact at ASCR. It was,
Mhm.
I certainly saw it as the good old boy club, and something that I really wasn't all that welcome
Mhm.
in that season. So I sort of disconnected. And then Warner Cruz was asked, I think by Frank Heaton, to take over a new council. And Warner called me up and said, "Hey, Mark," he was taking over his contents council. He said, "Mark, I'd love to have you involved with this. We both were
Mhm.
really interested in where contents were going." So I went to that convention, and I was like, man, this is grim. Like, the industry is in a place that, I mean, it's just going to lose its voice. And, I really had always felt a trade association was important for
Hmm.
restorers for a variety of different things, especially things that we're doing right now at RIA. And so there was a couple different things. I mean, one was just concern for the industry, and the other was, I got my CR back when I was really young, like 20 or 21 years old.
Hmm.
And I was like, man, if RIA is around, like my certification's not going to be worth anything anymore. And so
Yeah.
I was kind of self-serving there. But those were some of the reasons initially that I had gotten involved.
And so 14 years, a decade and a half almost. What what are you most proud of that the RIA has accomplished?
You're going to think I'm a broken record.
That's
Um,
okay. That they
Absolutely.
you
But
you
what I
cannot
am,
say some of these things often enough, man.
so absolutely, the most important thing from my perspective has been the engagement of the volunteers that we have at RIA, who are just throwing their weight behind the industry,
Hmm.
um, behind RIA as an organization, um, and doing it for the reasons that really pay respect to the heritage that a lot of us have in this industry. Um, there is on that board of directors, as you well know, you've been on the board for a few years now.
Hmm.
There are such incredible, dedicated volunteers that take their time. I mean, here's one thing about RIA's board of directors: nobody gets anything for being on the board.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of boards that people get compensated, they get, their hotel paid for, their airfare, and all these things. And, they get stipends, and there's all sorts of things, that people get for these things. But our board travels to these, takes time out of their day to go to board meetings, or out of their weeks, I should say, because these are big. I mean, I think of you traveling from Hawaii when we've got
Yeah.
a board meeting in wherever it is, the other side, like in Orlando, right?
Yeah.
I mean, we pay for our own convention registrations. We pay for everything, and so that really, I think, speaks to the level of dedication and importance that this board sees for RIA. And
Hmm.
the volunteers are selfish. It sounded like I said selfish. I didn't mean that. I meant selfless.
Hmm.
They are generous, and they have an incredible and deep concern for the future of this whole ecosystem that the property restoration industry is. And that's what I am most proud of, is that we've been able to build a board over this
Hmm.
time that embraces those ideals and does it in such a honorable way. And I've been on many, many boards over the course of my career, and a lot of people have poor motives for what I consider to be poor motives for why they get
Yep.
involved. Um, it's all about them and their ego and putting it on their resume and this sort of stuff. And I mean, I can just say with total sincerity, from many, many years of working with so many people, so many different board members and committee chairs and volunteers and staff members and all this, that this is a group of incredible people that care, and don't just care about the industry in this big sense or care about their business, but care about the people that actually are doing the work every single day, out there in the field, like the actual, entry place in this business all the way up to where they're at. Because many of us did that. Most
Yep.
of us on the board started at that level, grew up through the business. We know how much it's given us, and they want to
Mhm.
give back now. And man, that's just incredibly meaningful as I think about the time that I'm involved.
So we got about 10 minutes left. I got two more questions for you. Mentors or sources of inspiration?
Mm. Oh boy, so that would be a long list. I hate to answer that question because I know I'll leave out a dozen people
So
that
I'll put it
are
in a
really
box.
important.
You only get one.
Mm,
So then that way nobody comes after you. Because I know if you're like me, there's a million, right? Like I have nightmares about if Mark Springer and Debbie Bogart get into a fight, like who I'm going to root for. So I get it.
Like, let me give you a little peace of mind on that one. I don't see that happening.
I neither do I, which is
I
why
don't
it's a
see
nightmare, right?
Mark and Debbie going fisticuffs. Although I can tell you this, um, Debbie was someone who challenged before she got on the board.
Mm-hmm.
She challenged me a lot about what RA was and what it was
Mm-hmm.
doing, and we had some very, very spirited discussions. And ultimately, it resulted in. I hope in that case she would have cheered for me because I ultimately was able to twist her arm behind her back and get her to be on our board and say, Debbie, come help us with these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she did that, and we're of course incredibly indebted to her for doing that. Narrowing it down to one, that's so tough. See, there's been all these different seasons, where I've had a few people that have made a huge impact at different phases. If I were to say, like, who's the one person, this is
Okay. Who
I
was the
hate this
first?
question for the record, but I will say this without saying it's the most important or the one. I will give special credit because you talked about AGA to
Yeah.
one person, and that would be Ed Cross. Um, Ed Cross is someone that I looked up to for so many years. He has so much heart for restorers,
Mm-hmm.
and he has so much that he enters into with all of his professional expertise on behalf of restorers. And timing's everything. I already said that. It's cliche. I'll say it again. But when we launched AGA, getting Ed to participate with us was an uphill battle initially.
Mm-hmm.
RIA had a terrible reputation from a management perspective. We had another management group that didn't do us any favors. A bunch of initiatives were not followed up on. They didn't go well.
Mm-hmm.
Ed was sort of threw his hands up. He loved RIA, but it was like,
Yeah.
this is not headed the right way. And I had this whole series of calls to try to persuade him that things had changed.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of took a risk on me when we launched AGA. I sent him the initial drafts of the sort of AGA blueprint, the article
Mm-hmm.
I'd written about why we needed an AGA. And I remember he called me up, and I was so nervous that he was going to tell me, like, politely, Ed, he's so polite and such a
Yeah.
gentleman. And he's going to, like, politely decline. So he tells me these things. I thought he was setting me up for,
Mm-hmm.
and but I don't have the time, right? Ultimately, he was like, and I can't wait to do this with you. And Ed's someone who has spent a lot of his time, and of course the industry's been very good to him as well. But
Mm-hmm.
I without question, there's two people. There's no way AGA would be here if those two people weren't there, and that was Ed and Katie. Katie Smith would
Yeah.
be the other one. But those two, I can't say a one. That's impossible. Over the years, Pete Consigli and Cliff Zlotnick early on,
Mm-hmm.
they were huge for me. Phil Rosebrook, senior and junior, and Dave Rosebrook were huge in the early stages of us professionalizing our business. I mean, there's so many along the way. I
Mm-hmm.
could never do it justice. But when I think of, like, the one thing, like, AG was so big for restorers, and I remember telling Ed, "Here's my vision for this," and he just grabbed onto it with me, and off we went.
That dude never sleeps.
No, I know it's weird.
Yeah. All right. Last question. What's the one piece of advice you'd give any restorer in their first year or two of business? I think one of the great things that we're seeing in our industry right now, and it may be as a result of M&A, maybe as a result of, growth in the industry as a whole, but we're seeing a lot of folks that are younger than me, 10, 15 years younger than me, getting into the business. And I always say, man, if I can save you from some of the pain that I went through, like, just call me. I'm happy to do that. What's the one piece of advice you'd give to any one of those folks in their first year or two of business?
So, Anthony, you know how hard it is. I mean, this is a grind. Many people that start in this industry quit right before it's going to get good, right?
Yep.
There's some companies they start, and they just don't make it far enough.
Yeah.
And so I would say that the most important thing that anyone could do would be to invest in their leadership skills. Um, a lot of people, I think, when they start a company, there is a certain ego that goes with that of I own a company and I'm the man who makes the decisions and people need to do what I tell them to do, and this is my own little kingdom. But Maxwell says, and again, it's another cliche I'll throw out there, that everything rises and falls on leadership, but it's true.
Mhm.
And most of what we need to grow in as leaders is growing ourselves before we can grow our companies. And so I think to the degree that anyone can identify those areas where they have blind spots, and that's a very humbling thing about learning about leadership. It mostly means that we have to learn how to serve others,
Yeah.
and that we have to grow ourselves for our team so that we can serve them better, because a lot of these things aren't intuitive. They
Yeah.
take we fail, and it's humbling when we fail. But a real leader is able to take those things, to be able in humility to step forward, to step into what they're called to, and lead the team forward. And so invest in yourself, learn what it means to really be a servant leader, and I think you've got a chance to make it.
I would agree. I always say one of the greatest challenges is getting people who are strong at managing projects to start managing teams that
Mm,
manage projects, right? That jump from
right.
I'm doing well with our clients to I'm doing well with our people is just a huge gap. And there's no shortcutting it, unfortunately.
That's exactly right.
All right. In closing,
Time up, boss.
yeah, like what would you like to share in closing?
I mean, my closing is really just to you, Anthony. Thank you for setting up these interviews with the board. I think it's helped people understand the hearts of the people who
Yeah.
volunteer on their behalf, because that's what they do, is we do this on their behalf. Um, you're telling a great story that needs to be told. Um, in the time that you and I have served together, it's just been another marker of all these incredible privileges I've had in this industry. So thank you for that. Um, I hope finally that anyone that sees this before Christmas has a wonderful Christmas
Yeah.
and a happy New Year.
Right on. And, the same goes for my experiences with you and everybody else on the board. It has been a period of tremendous growth and impact, right? I struggled with where was I going, where was all this going to, right? Like growing this business, doing all these things. And, with the RIA board, I've been able to continue that mission of making the world a better place. And just who I'm making it better for has this cascading effect of like, I'm making it better for business owners who make it better for their employees, who make it better for everybody else in the community. Right.
That's right.
And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for your efforts and work. And I appreciate that wholeheartedly.
It's been an honor, privilege, and I sure appreciate you taking the time for me today.
Right on. Well, I hope that everybody is getting their tickets for Dallas because early birds closed already, but we still have plenty of tickets available. And we've been pushing the message out. But for those who don't know, it's going to be was solar or lunar eclipse. I can't remember. It's going to be
It is a solar eclipse.
It's a solar eclipse. And so we're expecting that hotel rooms are going to sell out quickly. So if you have not gotten your tickets yet and booked your hotel rooms, everybody on the board is encouraging you to do so now, so you're not sleeping in a tent in the back of your Tacoma in a parking lot somewhere. So make sure you get your tickets bought, and we'll see you there this April.
All right. Merry Christmas, everyone.